Good morning and welcome to the Coaches Show on Benton County Enterprise TV. We are in Week 10. I'm here with Head Coach Brad Drehle of the Lincoln Cardinals. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Let's start off with the Week 10, we're in Week 11. Let's start with the Week 10 game against Slater. You guys won 48-8. Pretty dominant game. You know, I like this part of the season because as a fan, it's, you get to cling to the Misha website and look at all the scores and see what's going to happen. Look at the like scores and like opponents. Half of the state ended their season last week.
That's correct. Yeah.
And you were a part of the half that extended to your season. Before we get into the stats and we start talking about last week, I've got to ask you about the health and about the injuries that you sustained last week. How will Lincoln look going into this week?
We'll be a little bit different. Connor's really grown into a good quarterback. He's a great competitor, but unfortunately with 26 seconds in the half the other night, he sustained a concussion, so he'll be out this week. Darren injured his shoulder on the first punt return of the game, so we were in the beginning of the game for 4 plays, and he went down, and his status is kind of a game time call. I think he's feeling better, but I'm not sure whether he'll be completely ready or not. I'm not sure what level he'll play for us on Friday night, but we've got some other kids who've stepped up and done a good job this week. We've gotten Riley and Kyle both ready to go at quarterback, and that's given Anthony an opportunity to come in and do some things at running back, and Cam at tight end. So it's I think we've got some kids that can come in and do some good things for us. We're kind of excited to see what they can do.
Well, and you've had opportunities throughout the season to exercise that depth. You've not a full JV schedule, but you've been in games where you've established a lead and got those young guys in, and we've seen those guys play a lot. So let's talk about what we saw in Week 10. As far as the stats go, we've got official stats here, but the scoring distances are not quite official. They're rough. Let's start with the passing. Connor Line, 5 for 6, 50 yards, a touchdown, and 2 two-point conversions. His touchdown came on a 21-yard completion to Kyle Eckhoff. Rushing, Ross Johnson had 15 attempts for 148 yards at 9.9 yards per carry. He scored 3 times from 9, 27, and 4 yards out again. All rough.
Right.
Anthony Schrader got involved heavily this week. 12 attempts, 99 yards. That's 8.25 yards per carry. He scored a 12-yard touchdown run to put Lincoln up 48-0 over Slater. Connor Line also had 10 rushes for 77 yards, 7.7 yards per carry, and a 9-yard score. Kyle Eckhoff, 5 attempts for 33 yards. And then Kyle Eckhoff in the receiving game had 3 catches for 29 yards, a touchdown with a 21-yard catch. Caleb Mundy also had 1 reception for 18 yards. He put in a 2-point conversion. Mac Hesse had a reception for 3 yards and a 2-point conversion. On the defensive side of the ball, Ross Johnson, 8 tackles and a sack. Camden Everhart was really, really getting his name called a lot early.
He played really well. He's played well here the last couple of weeks.
He has, and Brett and I were just, it was crazy because within the first 2 series, I think he had 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, and maybe should have got credit for a forced fumble or a fumble recovery on that kickoff that didn't. It was kind of weird. But Camden, great game. He had 5 tackles, a pair of sacks, a tackle for loss, and a pass breakup. Mac Hesse got involved, 3 tackles and a sack, and then Jacob Plum also had 4 tackles and a sack. Riley Sanders and Connor Line each had an interception. So, what stood out to you? You guys, you mentioned to me after the game that you felt like you came out a little slow, maybe just not as sharp as you'd like to be. But that, I feel like, from our perspective, that corrected itself fairly quickly. What did you see?
I think our kids came out and did some good things. We did. We'd like to have been a little bit more efficient. We turned the ball over on our second possession. Took away a score, and if that goes, that's one thing. And then, the thing about it is when you lose kids, you lose 2 of your starters, 2 seniors during the ball game. It kind of taints the victory, I guess, a little bit. It's hard to get excited 48-8 when you're already thinking about, okay, the next one, and how do we prepare our kids, and can we get Riley, can we get Kyle, can we get them ready to go and play in the district semifinal game?
Right, and you could tell the joy of winning the game was there, but it wasn't quite the same because of that looming uncertainty, especially with Connor being important. You talked about how well he's come along and what he's become on the offensive side of the ball. But playing 6 games on defense this year, or 7, he's been a true impact player at all 3 levels on defense.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about it is those guys, Kyle, Ross, and Connor, solidify everything for us in the middle. And they make the calls, and they make the adjustments, and they talk, and they provide some energy. And when you lose one of those pieces, then somebody else has got to step up. And I think as of late, Jacob Plum's done a good job. Eli's done a great job of leading with his energy and his effort. But we've got to get another voice in there somewhere. Somebody's got to step up and become kind of fill that void this week.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention Darren as well. I mean, he's had a tremendous receiving season. And he's got a lot of experience playing corner. He'll stick his nose in there and make a tackle.
Yep.
And now you're asking an underclassman to come in and fill the shoes of a senior who plays both ways. And that's a tall task.
It's different, and that's what we talk about all the time. There's a difference between a 14, 15-year-old boy and a 17-year-old young man.
Yeah.
Those kids just change, both physically and mentally. They grow up and they mature, and Darren has done that. He's night and day from a year ago. He's a completely different young man. He's been fun to watch him grow, and it's unfortunate that happened to him. Hopefully we can earn another 48 minutes so those guys get one more try.
Exactly. I think that's what everybody's clinging on to is that you get an opportunity to see those guys again. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back talking about the South Callaway Bulldogs.
Veracruz Trace Mexican Restaurant in Lincoln, Missouri is proud to support Lincoln and Warsaw High School football. The friendly staff at Veracruz serves delicious and authentic Mexican cuisine Sunday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday through Saturday from 11 to 10. Try it for yourself at 455 North Highway 65 or call it in at 660-547-0315.
Okay, Coach, so talking about South Callaway, 5-4. Last week they extended their season with a 22-20 victory over Tipton. I spoke about in that last segment about how we cling to Misha and we look at like opponents. Well, the only like opponent that you have is Tipton, a game we've talked about maybe every week since. And how it while it's kind of a stain on the resume, if you want to put negative connotation to it, I think we both agree that it's helped keep your kids level-headed and understand they can be beat. Now, you look, and Tipton got you guys, I think, if you play that game again, I'd like to think the Lincoln Cardinals would pull it out. South Callaway, very close victory there. South Callaway took care of business. What did you see on film versus Tipton that, has you worried or keeping you up at night or something that you've really...
Well, the biggest thing is that they run a bunch of different formations, so it's going to be us identifying formations and lining up correctly. And again, when you take, we'll have 3 freshmen in the ballgame,
right?
And so making sure that those kids understand what they're seeing and they react and they stay focused in the moment, that's a big piece of it. And our seniors, Kyle and Ross and those guys stepping up and making the calls and making sure that those guys are where they need to be is a big piece of it. What South Callaway has done is they've gotten better and better all year long. They lost early in the season. I think they had a 3-game stretch in there. I'm trying to remember who the first one was that they lost to, but then it was Louisiana and Bowling Green back-to-back weeks. Well, Bowling Green's rolling in Class 2.
Right.
They're extremely good. So they have played some very good competition, and as the years gotten on, they've just gotten better and better and better and put themselves in a position to, compete for a district title here. Obviously 2 more games left here, but a district semifinal game, and they're a team that's got tradition. Their kids understand what it takes to be in this moment. They've been in this moment. So, I just look at it as a great opportunity for our kids. That's what we keep telling them. You have an opportunity to earn 48 more minutes, and that's the way we're trying to approach this whole thing.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that mentality. When we got into when it was really getting there and you were seeing how the district was going to shake out, I think there were a lot of people, myself included, who thought South Callaway could be a little bit of a sleeping giant. You mentioned that they've played arguably the toughest schedule of anybody in the district. It's hard to say because Lincoln and Cole Camp having to play Adrian and then each other and Tipton, that's not right. But South Callaway playing Class 2 schools, playing one of the best Class 2 schools in the state probably, and then playing in a predominantly Class 2 conference. And they catch you guys at an opportune time for them when you're down two starters on both sides. You talked about having 3 freshmen in the ball game. There will be times where you have 4 or 5 freshmen.
Yeah.
You move them in on the defensive line a lot.
Yep.
And you've gotten good contributions out of those guys. Let's talk about, you mentioned the fact that they run a lot of formations. One formation that we saw on film a lot was flex bone, you got 2 wing backs and then you got a fullback. going through their personnel on offense. Quarterback number 15, he shows up as a quick, athletic kid. He's not huge, but he can hurt you. I mean, he can really, when anytime you play a team that runs the veer or the triple option or whatever you'd like to call it, usually they've got 3 or 4 threats, and they have 4, it appears.
Yeah, it does. They got some good kids. I mean, 3 plays at their fullback, their dive back, and the 21 and 31, along with 15. Those guys are all good athletes, and they turn around and play on defense, and they keep showing up in those things too, and they show up on their special teams here and there. So it's kind of like when you turn around and watch us. We've got some kids that continue to show up on both sides of the ball, and in that way they're similar. 15 he's quick. When in every game it seems like he has at least one run of 20 or more yards.
Yeah.
They're able to get him loose, and it's when you start to try to do something else. With veer and what we're seeing, you want to gap it out and force the ball all the way to the outside, and you want to get it to either phase 2 or phase 3 and try to eliminate the dive. And it's all predicated on who their guys are. But when both the quarterback and the pitchback can do something, then it puts you in a position where you have to be right all the time, and that's the biggest piece of it, is making sure that we fit everything in the right places.
And the quarterback and the pitchback, it's hard to distinguish the 2 pitchbacks from each other. I mean, 21 and 31 are the ones
Very
that
similar,
have been
yeah.
playing the last 2 weeks and beyond, but they are similar. And is there much that differentiates them? I mean, I don't want to pigeonhole 2 high school kids in the same thing, but they look really similar.
They do look really similar, and they play similar. They're both good athletes.
Right.
And defensively, 21 plays at a corner and 15 is a corner, and then you got 31 that is there's their mic and their 3-3 set. But it's unique in the fact that he's their adjuster defensively. So if you go out to a tight end wing, which we set in a split and a flanker, he'll roll out on top of that flanker.
Okay.
And they'll give you a 3-4 look at times, and then sometimes they'll bump out that outside linebacker. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach us as the game goes on. And last week against Tipton, we saw both of those looks. And then there were times that 31 lined up a corner.
Okay.
So that tells you he's a pretty good athlete and an intelligent football player. You wouldn't be able to do that with him.
Right. You spoke about number 3. He seems to be kind of their hammer. They used him a lot around the goal line, especially in the Louisiana film. I've compared him his body is kind of like a cross between Kyle and Ross, because he's thick but he's tall.
Long.
He doesn't appear to be as fast as either one of them, but he's not really a blocker. He's the dive back, and when they do want to lead block, they swap the tight end, number 44, who appears to be kind of just a 6th lineman. I've not seen them throwing the ball. I'm sure they got it in there somewhere, but what will you focus on in that triple option? Will you focus on something? I mean, you're trying to get it to the edge, so you got to stop the dive and the quarterback. Is that?
Yeah, the deal is just you want to gap it out. You want to string it out to the sideline and then rally and tackle the football. And so that's our goal. We're trying to cancel gaps inside and force the ball out.
On defense, you mentioned that Connor, Kyle, and Ross all make calls. I assume that Connor's calls are usually coverage related.
Yeah, and yes, and it's the fact that they're all 3 seeing the same thing, and they're echoing each other, and they're directing the defense. They're getting us in the right places.
So you'll still be able. I mean, you still have confidence in the other 2 to make the calls. I don't know how your calls work. If all 3 of them are making separate calls, or they're all making like.
Well, we're making a formation call, and then it just depends on what we get out of coverage and what we're doing from week to week.
Okay, so let's talk about the offensive and defensive line for South Callaway. It's hard to see numbers on film. Is there anybody there that really stands out above the rest?
Their center is probably one of the better centers that we played, and at the high school level at times, the option teams tend to play a smaller kid in there, but he's not. He's a big kid. He does a good job of getting off the ball. He gets off quick, and that's the thing that I notice about him, is how fast they get off the football. When you watch film and you watch the dive portion of it, they really get off the ball. They like to cut on the backside A gap. So if we got somebody getting into that backside A gap, they're going to be cut during the night, and they do a good job of their pull game and stuff. It's their offense is more based on speed and as far as getting off of the football.
Okay. The last player I have here from their offense, number 28, he a lot of times will be at receiver, especially when they're in the flex bone. Sometimes he's the only receiver out there. They don't throw the ball a lot. They had to throw the ball a decent amount against Bowling Green. He had a nice play in that game.
He's had a couple catches in every game. If you watch, they get into that 5 wide. They like to send him on kind of almost a hitch and go. I mean, it's kind of a halfback pass type concept. And I think it's really an RPO off of it, run pass option for the quarterback. And you know, he's made some big plays. He got one against Montgomery County. He had one last week against Tipton, and the second time Tipton was able to, you know, to sniff it out. But he just does some good things. And they lull you to sleep. You know, they block, and then all of a sudden they're releasing him down the field. So you kids have got to be disciplined all the time.
When they get to where they've got to pass, is he 15's favorite target?
21.
21 is.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you watch the pass stuff when they sprint out and stuff, he's looking for him. They'll bring him from the backside of the field. They'll bring him from the inside of trips, and
Okay.
They'll use him in empty from the same spots.
Okay. Well, we've pretty much touched on the offense and the defense at the same time when talking about personnel. You know, you talk about Class 1 football, and 75, maybe 80% of the kids are playing both ways.
And everything.
Formationally, what do you expect? You know, you talked about a 3-4. What do you expect them to do when they realize, you know, we talked about the weather. It's going to rain, so that.
No, they'll load the box. I mean, that's what they want to do. Their goal is to stop the run, and they've been able to do that every week. And they load it up. They've got 2 defensive ends that really come hard off of the edge, and then they play some games inside. They'll bring usually they'll bring at least 5.
Yeah, and Tipton is really predicated on running the ball too. They got 19 got loose one time on them, but other than that, they did a good job kind of hemming the run game of Tipton in. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, I guess they'll just have to tackle Ross, Kyle, and Anthony about 40 times and see. It'll just be a field position game, like you said before we got on the air. Well, let's go ahead and go to another commercial break.
Are you missing that human touch with your bank? Come talk to a real person at Community National Bank and Trust. We're your local bank that's small enough to know you, yet big enough to offer the best products. Stop by and see us at 101 South 65 Highway in Lincoln or 1695 Hilltop Drive in Warsaw. Your community, your bank, your relationship. Community National Bank and Trust. Federally insured, locally awesome. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
So in Week 11, the 6th-ranked Lincoln Cardinals will host the Bulldogs of South Callaway in the district semifinal. Kickoff is set for 7 p.m. If you're not able to make it, as we are every week, Brett Bryan and I will be live about 10 minutes before kickoff on BCE TV at www.citylinktv.com. Coach, thanks for joining us today. Good luck this week.
Thank you.
And I hope to have another Coach's Show next week.
Me too.
We'll see you next week.
This has been a BCE TV production. Thank you for watching.